galaxy of superstar Sri Lankan personalities from all walks of life, sharing their stories, their experiences, their success and even their failures. With thousands of young Sri Lankans filled with ambition and hope.
The Gamada Vipos Leadership Series,
where leaders of today shape leaders for tomorrow.
Good evening and welcome to your primetime news right here on TV1 with News First. I'm Deshan Gonavala, and I think it goes without saying that at present, apart from the massive issues that have arisen because of the COVID-19 pandemic, another issue that is affecting the everyday lives of the people in this country is displayed in these visuals here behind me as well, the onset of extremely heavy rains. But unfortunately, that's not the only issue in Sri Lanka at the moment either. Your anchor for today, Charlene Benedict, will also be joining you in just a little bit. But before that, let's have a look at this issue and also have a look at what other stories we have in store for you today.
$130,000 people in 5 districts affected by heavy rains. 5,000 people directed to safe shelters. Inclement weather claims 3 lives. Water levels of the Kalu, Kalani, Ging and Attanagalu rivers on the rise. Landslide warnings issued to 6 districts. Owner of the sinking ship apologizes to the people of Sri Lanka. How did the ship enter the Sea of Sri Lanka? A number of factions demand for an impartial investigation. Risk of dengue in the Colombo district.
Now, as you may know, the inclement weather seen all over the country has left a number of areas inundated and a number of livelihoods also disrupted already in an already unstable situation. Now, even though the rains were extremely heavy over the last 2 days and were subdued to some degree in certain areas today, there was also a number of situations where flooding had occurred. In some areas, this had receded. In Colombo, Gampaha and Ratnapura in particular, you can still see heavy amounts of flood water with the overflowing of certain water bodies. Let's have a look at some of the visuals provided to us by the Air Force. Tragic scenes indeed from areas across the island. Now, as usual, the Met Department has also issued an advisory in the face of the inclement weather that we are seeing, and we have to remind you as a responsible news organization that the Met Department has announced that they are once again expecting extremely heavy rains over the course of tonight. So we urge you to take all the necessary precautions in doing so. In addition, the Met Department has also stated that the strongest rains are expected in the western Sabaragamuwa and north central provinces, and also the Galle and Matara districts, with over 150 millimeters of rain expected.
The highest rainfall in the 24 hours that ended at 8:30 this morning was reported from Dummala Surya. The rainfall in the area was recorded at 346.7 millimeters. A number of other areas also received rainfall exceeding 300 millimeters today. Karadana received a rainfall of 316.5 millimeters, while Ahaliyagoda received a rainfall of 311.5 millimeters. The rainfall in Horana was recorded at 302.5 millimeters, while Matugama received rainfall of 293 millimeters.
We can expect the prevailing heavy showers to further intensify. There is also a possibility of the floods in certain areas to further aggravate. These conditions will continue in the island over the next 2 days. Residents of low-lying areas in the vicinity of river basins must be extremely vigilant of the current situation. Also, motorists using roads in these low-lying areas must also be cautious. Floods in these areas may increase, and we would like to request motorists to refrain from travelling through these areas if you are unaware of the situation there. According to senior geologist of the National Building Research Organisation, Vasantha Senadira, landslide warnings were issued to many divisional secretariats in 7 districts due to heavy rains in those areas. Level 2 warnings were issued to the Nelluva Divisional Secretariat in the Galle district, Bulat Singhala and Ingiriya Divisional Secretariats of the Kalutara district, Dehiyovita Divisional Secretariat in the K Galle district, the Ahaliyagoda, Kalavana Divisional Secretariats in the Ratnapura district. Level 1 warnings were issued for the Sitavaka Divisional Secretariat in the Colombo district, Palindanuvara Divisional Secretariat in the Kalutara district, Pitabadda Divisional Secretariat in the Matara district, Valapane Divisional Secretariat in the Nuwara district, the Yellapatha, Ratnapura, Kiriyalla and Kuruvita Divisional Secretariats in the Ratnapura district. The Disaster Management Centre is ready to respond to any situation. The districts of Gampaha, Colombo, Ratnapura, Putlam and Kalutara are affected by inclement weather. As of now, 5 districts and 13 divisional secretariats are affected by this. By the day after tomorrow, this situation will return to normalcy. Be vigilant about your surroundings. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, social distancing must be maintained in relief centres. We are ready to provide relief services required for everyone. We provided some as well. 6 vessels have been placed. If there are any inconveniences caused due to floods, you can contact the hotline 117. Those in high-risk areas must charge their phones and power banks. Apart from a disaster bag, keep a COVID-19 bag ready as well. Several accidents were caused due to heavy rains as well. An earth embankment collapsed onto a house located in Dumbara, Ihalapola in Kiriyalla, Ratnapura today. A woman and her 16-year-old daughter had been in the house at the time. Residents of the area were able to save the life of the mother, but in an unfortunate turn of events, the life of her daughter was lost under the rubble. A person passing the house at the time was also buried under the debris, and Sri Lanka Army and police have launched search operations to locate him. A 14-year-old boy who was caught in a strong current in Wilpara, Maravilla is reported missing. Search operations are underway to locate the child. We came here at about 5:30 in the evening. We tried to go towards the mill, and it was then he was caught in the current. Then we went to rescue him. Both of us also drowned. I managed to cling on to a tree. Another person drowned and emerged from the water later on from another location. But our friend who drowned first never emerged from the water. Meanwhile, a 21-year-old male is reported to be dead after he was caught in strong currents in Mugunuvatavana Madampe. According to our correspondent, the deceased had gone sightseeing with his friends during the floods and then was caught in the current. One person sustained injuries after an earth embankment collapsed onto a house in Pollattakade, Gatahatta. The Gatahatta-Ingiriya road had sunk from the Udagama area, and transport on the Ahaliyagoda Kiriyalla main road was hampered after an earth embankment collapsed onto the road. 5 houses in Peragasmulla, Kaduwela were damaged after an earth embankment collapsed in the area. Meanwhile, a house has sunk in Koratota, Kaduwela today.
Many areas including Kaduwela and Kelaniya were inundated due to heavy rains today.
කොටිකවට ප්‍රදේශයේ නිවාස 400ක් පමණ ජලයෙන් වුණා. අප වාර්තාකරු පැවසුවේ කැලණිගක පිටාර ගැලීම නිසා කැලණි මුල්ල නාගහවෙල දහම්වෙල ඇතුළු
and Damavela were severely affected by floods caused by the overflowing of the Kalani River. The overflowing of the Kalani River also inundated about 300 houses in Totalanga. Many houses in Velevatta, Vellampetiya were also flooded last night due to incessant rains in the area. Residents of 59 houses in Sivalivatta, Hangvella were affected by floods caused by the overflow of the Kalani River. According to our correspondent, people displaced by the floods have been sheltered at the Mayadunna Mahavidyalaya. About 130 houses in Gamagevatta in Pamulla were inundated after the Diyavanna Oya overflowed. Heavy rains flooded many low-lying areas in the Kalutara district. A tipper truck toppled along the Morototua Millania road while the area was inundated. The seas off the coast of Gaul were rough today as a result of heavy rains experienced in the area. Fishermen in Dodandua and Hikadua refrained from going out to sea today. Meanwhile, heavy rains flooded low-lying areas in the Gaul district, including Alutwala and Gonapinuwala. According to the current weather forecast, heavy showers exceeding 150 millimeters are likely during the next 24 hours. So the Disaster Management Center and the district secretariats are coordinating with the security forces to conduct rescue operations. We have already prepared rescue teams to be deployed to the areas that need them. We would like to inform the public residing in low-lying areas along the banks of the Gin River to be extremely vigilant. Many low-lying areas in Hiniduma and the Udagam Hiniduma main road was inundated. The Gaul Nelua road was 8 feet underwater in Mahabodhivatta. Vehicular movement along the road was completely halted. The overflow of the Nilvala river flooded the Akuressa Panudugama road and many other areas in the Mathura district. Many farmlands were flooded after the Harloya overflowed. Meanwhile, the Department of Irrigation warned that minor flood levels in low-lying areas of Dehiovita, Ruanvella and Dompe could aggravate. Director of Water Management at the Department of Irrigation, D. Abe Sirivardhana, said that 8 spill gates of the Tapbova and Deduroya reservoirs were opened.
Now, as you saw, there are a number of precautionary steps have been taken by a number of agencies that are responsible within government for the handling of this situation, both on a natural front when it comes to the impacts of the disaster and also a more humanitarian front when it comes to handling the issues that arise with people and their families and the displacement that occurs. The Disaster Management Center has already taken a number of steps, including setting up of these centers where these people can go if they feel the need to do so or if they need to be evacuated. But in the meantime, residents of Gampaha complain that areas that previously were not underwater during flood season and also during heavy rains are now underwater, and they allege that it is due to misplanned or unplanned projects taking place in the area.
Houses in several areas including Yattagoda, Ganegoda and Veyangoda were inundated after rivers such as the Attanagalu Oya, Uruwal Oya and the Di Ali Oya had overflown due to heavy rains. Locals alleged that the floods were caused due to the construction of the Central Expressway's portion between Kadawatha and Mirigama.
They have laid stones to construct the expressway across the Uruwal. This has resulted in houses being inundated. The huge mound of sand has also prevented water from draining. This has caused flooding in areas near the expressway. Houses that were never flooded before are now experiencing floods. We like development, but we must inform the President that certain officials are engaging in foolish activities. The maximum extent of destruction has been caused here.
Our correspondents visited several areas in the Gampaha district today. Several low-lying areas had been inundated due to heavy rains experienced in the locality. Several areas including Gampaha, Veyangoda and Madawatha had been inundated due to heavy rains experienced since last evening. Our reporters observed that several houses had been submerged. Locals attribute the unorganized filling of land due to the construction of the Southern Expressway to the floods that have hit their neighborhood.
ප්‍රධාන කාරණේ. නැත්නම් මෙච්චර දවස් මේ කාලෙකට දැන් ගංගොතර මෙච්චර දුරක් ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ.
මොනවා කරන්නේ ළමයින්ගේ පොත්පත් බලන්න ගිහිල්ලා සේරම යට වෙලා. ගන්න කියලා උස්සන්න කියලා කොහෙට උස්සන්නද? ගන්න තැනකුත් නැහැ. ගොඩාම බලපාලා තියෙන මේ හයිවේ එක හදන්න ගත්තා.
The highway is the main cause for this problem. We have told them not to engage in constructions in this manner as it causes flooding. But they told us that they will utilize machines and prevent such incidents from occurring. But that isn't the case.
Flood waters in the area had reached up to 5 feet in height last evening. Meanwhile, several acres of paddy fields in Veyangoda have been submerged due to the floods.
Meanwhile, the Kalaniya River overflowed and inundated the Biyagama Mabima area. According to our correspondent, a layer of oil was seen on top of the water.
දැන් බලන්න මේ ළිඳේ වතුර. දැන් මේක මෙහෙම තියෙන මේ පැයක් විතර තිබ්බට පස්සේ මේක බොනවනේ අපි දන්නේ නැතුව බිම නැති රෝගනේ හැදෙන්නේ මහත්තයා. ඒකද ඔක්කොම මේ ගොවිතැන් කරපුවා තියෙන්නේ. සම්පූර්ණ තෙල් වලින් වැහිලා ගිහිල්ලා.
Investigations were carried out by officials of the Sapugaskanda oil refinery who arrived at the location and took measures to remove the oil.
Now, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, citing the issues that have taken place, has already informed authorities over the course of today to take the necessary action to provide the relief to the people.
According to the Prime Minister's office, the subject minister for disaster management, Chamal Rajapaksa, was informed of the matter at a discussion held today. The Prime Minister had instructed for relief measures to be carried out via district secretariats and also instructed the Finance Secretary to allocate the necessary provisions. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa had instructed Secretary to the Finance Ministry, S.R. Artigala, to immediately release the required funds in this regard.
As you saw over the course of today, we have had a number of accidents related to the weather, and the weather situation does not seem to be easing to a great degree as of yet. The Disaster Management Centre has also reminded the importance of continuing to be vigilant and continuing to take the right precautions in the face of the inclement weather we are saying. And News First would like to remind you, the viewer, once again, that we all have a responsibility also for our own safety, and to make sure that you take the necessary precautions for the same. And as I mentioned at the start of the bulletin, I think we have a few more issues that need to be spoken about and a few more stories that need to be addressed. So, Charlotte Benedict, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Deshan, for that update on the current weather situation in the country, and also once again a reminder to the general public to continue to be vigilant during this season. But of course, besides the direct impact of this inclement weather that Sri Lanka is experiencing, including floods and landslides, there are also various other diseases that begin to raise their head during this season. Now, health authorities said that there is a risk of dengue spreading as a result of the prevailing monsoon conditions, with a large number of patients already being detected from the Colombo district.
In total, 7,860 dengue patients have been reported within this year, out of which 859 patients have been reported within the month of May. One-third of that 859 patients were detected from the Colombo district. If patients are being reported from the Colombo district, there is a risk of an epidemic beginning. Both COVID and dengue are viral diseases. The basic symptoms in both the deceased are similar in certain ways. Both show fever. We cannot determine for sure whether it is COVID, dengue or any other viral disease by looking at symptoms like body ache and headache. Therefore, if anyone has symptoms of fever, body ache and headache, that person should visit a doctor immediately.
Commander of the Army General Shavendra Silva said that 2,735 COVID-19 patients were identified today. This increases the total number of COVID-19 infections in the country to 198,579. 1,884 patients made a full recovery and were discharged. The total number of COVID-19 recoveries in the island rose to 164,281.
There is a batch of COVID-19 vaccines being donated from the US.
The United States has decided to donate 7 million COVID-19 vaccines to Asia, including Sri Lanka, under the framework of Biden administration announced yesterday. As of now, 4 million doses of the vaccines have been given to Mexico and Canada. The Biden administration announced its framework for sharing at least 80 million US vaccine doses globally by the end of June.
We must accept this vaccine donation by the United States in a positive manner. The decision regarding Pfizer or AstraZeneca will depend on discussions held at the top. We are expecting the AstraZeneca vaccine since we have an amount of that required for the second dose.
Moving on to the complications caused by the sinking Express Pearl ship, a fundamental rights application was filed with the Supreme Court today, seeking an order to be made on Ports and Shipping Minister Rohith Gunawardena and relevant officials to conduct a special investigation on how the sinking Express Pearl container ship entered Sri Lankan waters. The application was filed by the Centre for Environmental Justice, its Executive Director Hemantha Vittanage and several fishermen.
Ports and Shipping Minister Rohith Gunawardena, State Minister Nalaka Godaheva, Environment Minister Mahinda Amarveera, the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, the Marine Environment Protection Authority and the Central Environmental Authority were named as respondents in the application. The petitioners state that a large number of chemicals that were being transported on board the Express Pearl had contaminated the ocean following the fire, resulting in serious environmental destruction. The petitioners noted that as a result, the fishing community has lost its livelihood and requested the Supreme Court to issue an order noting that their fundamental rights had been violated. The petitioners also requested the Supreme Court to issue an order to compensate the fishermen who had lost their livelihoods. In addition, the petitioners requested the Supreme Court to issue an order on the relevant officials to prepare a proper mechanism to prevent such maritime accidents from taking place in Sri Lankan waters.
We have directed our attention towards setting up a separate fund for the environment activities. The petition has focused on the losses incurred to the tourism industry and damage to our atmosphere. We decided to set up separate funds for these and receive compensation for our losses. The politicians and leaders of this country will not be able to use this money. Also, we would like to request the authorities to appoint a committee to monitor these affairs as well. Those committees will have to provide recommendations to court to determine the gravity of the damages that were caused, as well as ways in which we can seek compensation for them.
මේ අංශවල සිදු හානිය සහ ඒවා යථාවත් කිරීම සම්බන්ධව නිර්දේශ ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම සඳහා ඒ නිර්දේශ අධිකරණයට ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම සඳහායි අපි නියෝග ඉල්ලා සිටින්නේ.
What is the current status of the sinking ship?
In response to requests made by the Criminal Investigation Department from the Sri Lanka Navy to transfer an investigation team to the location where the MV Express Pearl is sinking in order to obtain seawater samples, conduct on-site monitoring and investigate the impact on the marine environment due to the ship's fire, the Navy involved in the facilitation. Sri Lanka's Coast Guard ship Samudra Raksha transferred a 14-member investigation team which included officials from the Government Analyst Department to the location for their ongoing investigations.
How prepared are we to handle an oil leakage?
3 vessels from the Indian Coast Guard, 3 vessels from the salvage. The Sri Lanka Navy and our tugboats are on the lookout if in any case there is an oil leakage from the ship. So far we have not received any reports pertaining to any oil leakage from the ship. If a sudden change in weather occurs due to the present state of the ship, the options we have are limited. We would not be able to use booms or sprays. Either the fuel tanks have to be sealed if we cannot use booms, or the fuel tanks have to be emptied, but none of these have happened, has it? First of all, we have to check whether these oil tanks are intact. But still we have not come to that level. After we get the chance to send someone to assess that situation, we can determine the next steps we should take.
What is the response of the company that owns the Express Pearl?
The CEO of Express Feeders, the operator of MV Express Pearl, expressed deep regrets and apologies for the impact that the incident has caused on livelihoods and the environment.
First of all, I'd like to express my deep regrets and apologies to the Sri Lankan people for the harm this incident has caused both to their livelihood and to the environment of Sri Lanka. Very hard to assess. The cost story is very hard to assess currently, and the direct financial burden on Express will be very limited. We need to bear in mind that this will be a long process at looking, first of all, to see when this incident will be over, and then to assess the total damages. We need to remember that Sri Lanka now is under a lockdown. It is very hard to mobilize people, and we are very thankful both to MIPA and to the Navy for mobilizing people. We have contributed from our side some heavy equipment to help clean up the beaches, but we cannot engage now Sri Lankan people. It is only the responsibility of the authorities because of the lockdown.
When and how did the fire first occur?
Providing a timeline of events, Express Feeders CEO Shumel Yoskovitz said the container was first loaded on the ship on the 10th of May at the Jebel Ali port in Dubai. He said, and I quote, "It was discovered leaking while alongside Hamad, which is a port in Qatar. When it was detected, we asked to discharge it. The port authorities did not allow it since they had no manpower or the equipment readily available to discharge," unquote. The CEO also added, and I quote, "Afterwards, the vessel sailed into Hazira, a port in India, where we requested the Hazira port to allow us to discharge the container. Again, it was rejected, more or less for the same reason as it was in Hamad," unquote. The MV Express Pearl then arrived in Sri Lankan waters on the 19th of May, and smoke was detected the next morning. CEO Yoskovitz said until that time there was only leakage from one container, which was handled and controlled by the crew.
It's very hard to assess what caused the fire. There were many commodities on board the vessel, and there was one container leaking. So it does lead to a most probable cause, but we are not 100% sure, and I would like to emphasize this. There are many incidents like that at sea, and sometimes terminals and ports are able to help, and sometimes not. There is an International Maritime Dangerous Goods Convention that accordingly the crew has handled this leak. And so far what we have checked, they have handled it correctly. And this was true until the 20th of May when we detected the smoke. You need to remember that we load containers that are signed and sealed, and we don't open them. we are dependent on the declaration and the professionality of our shippers, that they will pack the containers correctly and that they will declare them correctly. Over the past few years and throughout history, actually, there have been countless incidents of fires, not to talk about leaks, which happen probably on a weekly basis, which we don't hear, thank God, because catastrophe has not happened.
This shipping company is trying to avoid a compensation payment. Looking at the statements made by the CEO of the company, they are trying to say that paying compensation to Sri Lanka is not necessary, as the Sri Lanka port and the Sri Lanka port authorities are at fault when it comes to the fire that erupted. There's a huge problem when it comes to the way the government interfered in this. The government allowed the ship to enter our waters, and they were not prepared to douse the fire and did not ask for international help in that matter. There are many doubts like that. There are many issues even after the ship burnt. The basic legal action against the ship, such as arrests and filing court cases, were not carried out. Moreover, information regarding the damage caused by the ship has not been collected. It has come to a point where we are unable to prove whether there were other chemicals apart from the ones mentioned by this company and the damages they had caused. Even now, they haven't done the required assessments. Is it only that company that is trying to neglect to pay compensation? Investigations must be carried out to identify whether there is any Sri Lankan authority who is assisting this company in doing so.
ඒ සමාගමට වන්දි ගෙවීමෙන් මගහැර යාම සඳහා උදව් කරන ලංකාවේ නිලධාරීන් සහ බලධාරීන් සිටීද කියන එක සම්බන්ධයෙන් පරීක්ෂා කරන්න ඕනේ.
The sinking of the Express Pearl ship, of course, as you all know, has caused much adverse effects on fishermen in Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, farmers in Sri Lanka are also facing their own issues. Details of these stories and more come your way.
Bellboy's got you covered. Download Bellboy today to get all your household appliance fixing and repairs done. Now available on Android and iOS.
Welcome back to the news. The Janata Vimukti Peramuna convened a media briefing today and expressed their views on the government's decision on the use of fertilizer.
The incumbent president, as the presidential candidate, announced on the election platform that all types of fertilizers will be provided free of charge to the farming community. He turned his back on his decision and took this decision on April 28. There is a need to create a standardization and quality assurance for the imported organic matter. There is no such quality assurance for organic fertilizer in our country. The president says to import organic fertilizer for this Maha season. This attempt places our country in danger as it faces the risk of a large number of toxic pathogens, harmful microorganisms and harmful plant species entering our country. There is also a high risk of heavy metal entering our country. Therefore, we urge the president to please stop the hasty decision taken to import this organic fertilizer. If it is to be done, a long-term quality inspection plan is required.
එසේ නැතුව කඩුමුඩි වඳුර වැස්සට ගෙවල් හදන්න යනවා වගේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් අර නේද මොකක් හරි තදියම් වුණාම පිට්ටනියක් හොයන්න යනවා වගේ. හරිද? මේ තීන්දුව ගන්න එපා කියලා අපේ ජනාධිපතිවරයාට කියනවා.
Do not rush into these decisions. According to the Plant Protection Act and the Quarantine Act, there is no room for the importation of organic fertilizer in our country. When there is no such space, the president decides to import fertilizer. Also, there are 46 members of the Committee for Organic Cultivation. Several members of this task force who are businessmen.
ඒ 46 දෙනාගේ කමිටුවේ යම් යම් ව්‍යාපාරිකයන් නියෝජනය කරනවා. එම ජනාධිපති කාර්යසාධක බලකායේ
are trying to hold discussions to import. When the quarantine project came up, who gave up the hotels they owned? When the government was constructing a middle-class housing scheme, who set up a construction company that did not exist before and take over the contract to build those houses? The business side of all new government projects is done by the group around the president.
Colombo Additional Magistrate V. Prabhakaran today granted bail to 7 suspects who attended an event that was allegedly held at a 5-star hotel in Colombo in violation of quarantine regulations. The suspects were released on personal bail of 100,000 rupees each.
The suspects were arrested and produced before court by the Colombo Crimes Division. Assistant Superintendent of Police Neville Silva, who appeared for the Colombo Crimes Division, informed the court that steps would be taken to quarantine them following their release on bail. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Public Security, issuing a notice, said that Pumi Hansamali has called Minister Sarath Weerasekara and requested to make arrangements to provide her with extra clothes as she was taken to Badulla for quarantining with the attire she was wearing at the time. The notice states that Chandimal Jayasinghe in a phone call had made a similar request. The notice issued by the ministry cites that the group had been taken to the Thalangama police and were granted the opportunity to collect the clothes after Minister Sarath Weerasekara had informed the IGP and the senior DIG in charge of the Western Province. It adds that the group had then been escorted to the quarantine centre.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News on TV1 for tonight. Of course, once again, a reminder during these prime times with the COVID-19 pandemic and also the current inclement weather condition in Sri Lanka, do take all precautions. Stay safe, stay at home. Thank you very much for tuning in. That's a wrap of Primetime News. I'm Charlotte Benedict for the Newsfirst team. Take care and God bless.